Hi, everybody, and a big warm welcome. I'm absolutely stoked about our first ever outsourcing conference at PaySpace. And we have some really exciting sessions lined up, as I'm sure you've already seen. So for this session, I have a really special guest with me today, and I'm really excited for the conversations we're going to have. So joining me today is a master of payroll with a massive passion for processes and efficiency. With that, I welcome Tinka Pretorius from Ericsson. Tinka, pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be with you.
So Tinka, tell us a little bit more about Ericsson. So it's sort of a household name, and if I think back to the time I learned about Ericsson, it was very much aligned with when cell phones became a big thing. And we know that it's a telecommunications company, but Ericsson it's not the only thing that Ericsson is focusing on, is it?
Okay, so Ericsson sold off the cell phone part of the business some years ago. So currently, Ericsson is one of the leading providers of information and communication technology, ICT, to service providers. So it's a mouthful, and the technical part of it, I won't go in.
Yeah, thank you. To be honest, that technical stuff goes over my head. So, but it's a great company, and innovation is key in the times we live in. So Ericsson is a global company with a multitude of operations. How many countries are you specifically looking after?
So I'm looking after 30, of which 3 of them currently do not have employees in them. So at this point, it's 27.
Okay, wow, that's massive. It's really big operations. And I'm sure this obviously includes a high level of business complexity. So have you been to any of these countries?
I have been to 17 African countries.
Big number.
Yeah, and a number of them more than once. So yes, I've been to a number of them.
I'm sure you have some exciting stories traveling in Africa. It's not for the faint-hearted, hey?
To be honest with you, I've traveled in Europe as well, and I think Africa is underrated. There's a lot to see and experience.
That's very true. Maybe it's my South African origin, but I've got a really big passion for Africa, so I completely agree with you. Do you have a favorite African country?
So my favorite African country is Kenya. It's beautiful.
Okay, it's still on my list. I actually haven't been there. I'd really like to go there. I remember back in my consulting days, this was pretty much the time that I have traveled the most, at least for work purposes. And waiting at the airport was kind of, that was my favorite part of traveling. Now, I know a lot of people would probably think about it and say like, TJ, seriously, are you crazy? That's the most frustrating part. But it's actually where I discovered reading. It's one of the best ways to pass time. And we all know how much knowledge is still in books. So yeah, those were the good old days when we could still meet with customers and travel the world. So Tinka, I actually snooped around on your LinkedIn and I saw that you recently had a job title change. So I changed to Business Services Improvement Manager. That's quite a mouthful and it's modern. It sounds very exciting, but I've got no clue what this is all about. Please tell me more. I have to ask.
Okay, so we have the Local Administration Services Department. They are also located in each one of our countries, and they manage all the administrative functions of a business. So I've accepted a offer, and I will be moving to LIS at the 1st of December.
That's amazing. Congratulations. I really look forward to see how you smash this new opportunity. I mean, from the time that we first interacted, it's been, you're a very dynamic woman and you get things done. So they definitely have the right person for this job.
Thank you.
All right. So Tinka, I mean, you just mentioned that there's about 30 countries that falls under your portfolio, of which 28 or 27 at least are very operational. And thinking about that, each country has their own legislation, their own way of doing business, their own culture, and that in itself brings a lot of different challenges to the table. Let's maybe chat around some of the challenges that you've experienced with Ericsson in the time that before you outsourced to PaySpace. What was life like back then?
I think the major challenges faced at that point was the fact that payroll wasn't centralized. I took over West Africa and East Africa last. And to me, those were the biggest challenges, especially because of all the complexity in the statutory payments, and also some of the components in these countries, payroll components, that I had to really investigate and make sure that this is handled well, because it wasn't in the past. If I think about one example, it would be in Senegal, where you have tax dependents, and which meant that you could have more than one wife. I don't know why you would want more than one wife, and you get benefits for your children and your wives. Yes.
Well, no, maybe it's just because I'm a man, but having more than one wife does sound like you're gonna have your hands full.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, keeping those complexities in mind, what does it mean if we think about the outsourcing structure and what PaySpace can bring to the table? You get allocated with a dedicated account manager. What does it mean to have a dedicated account manager in the form of a payroll specialist, and they have direct access to the compliance team?
I think if I look at the experience we've had when we started, and we had to get all of these countries moved over firstly to Ericsson, it was still a challenge, because you don't have the compliance experience or the compliance in-house. So, and if you look at in Ericsson, we have tax teams as well, but they're more focused on corporate tax. So the benefit of outsourcing is the fact that the provider have a dedicated compliance team that focuses on the payroll issues. And if I think of the journey that we've had, you can really see not only improvement but enhancements that we did with you, with everything that we have developed and improved on.
Okay, and I mean, it kind of speaks to a way of mitigating that business risk, especially from a compliance perspective, right? So, correct me where I'm wrong, but I think our journey started back in 2017. So this has been over the course of the last 4 years.
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. So thinking about the business complexity and the structures within different operations with a multitude of countries, this obviously has had an intense resource requirement on the business itself. And a term that recently kind of turned into a buzzword, especially in the PaySpace Ericsson environment, or at least the context, is the hub spoke team. What is this and how does it work?
Okay, so when we started, we had a resource in Nigeria. I currently still have the resource in Nigeria. We have one in East Africa, but then locally we had 6 in our team. And I think there was still a bit of a disconnect, not in our region, but with us from the way the rest of the continent is handled. So, for example, in India has moved to the hub spoke team, which is a payroll hub. They just call it the hub spoke team. Some years ago, we started with the hub spoke team last year, January. What we did is, firstly, there's 2 tools. We call it automation tools. One for overtime, standby. And the second one is where the HR managers can capture their input, the HR variable tool. So the HubSpot team first started with that. Gradually we brought it into the team. And then in the middle of last year, it was decided to move all operations over to the HubSpot team in India. And now, currently, we don't have any local payroll staff in South Africa.
Okay, so maybe just for some context for myself as well, and maybe for the audience, how does the structure currently work? Because if it liaises through India at the moment, and how do you get the information from your in-country partners through India back to PaySpace for processing purposes?
Okay, so when an employee starts with Ericsson, the recruiter will create a profile on SAP, because our HR system and our financial system is on SAP. will create a profile. It will then workflow to the HR manager, the line manager for approval. That will have all the personal information and the salary information on. Then your HR variable tool and your overtime tool, this is for changes. So there is no manual input accepted. So if there's any overtime that an employee claims or standby or kilometer reimbursement, they will access the tool, capture their overtime, and it will then be routed to the line manager and HR manager for approval. The second tool is the HR variable tool, where the HR manager will capture changes. For example, if there's a change in marital status, like for example in Senegal, or if there is a reward that someone received for excellent service, the same there there will be approval process. And once it's approved, we have a set calendar, which is around about normally the 1st of the month. The reports will then automatically be shared with the Augsburg team. They will make sure that whatever received on the report, enough knowledge, enough detail so that the PaySpace team will be able to process. So once they've put it on the correct format, they will upload it to the cloud. And then the process will start with the PaySpace team processing.
Okay, so there's a lot of collaboration in between different teams and different systems. And I think that actually speaks to the point of how PaySpace can integrate with different systems to enhance those processes. But there's also a lot of governance that needs to be done through this. And speaking to some of the account managers working with Ericsson, I've heard the term of a process Bible or a governance Bible. What's the value of that? Because obviously there's a lot of role players in this, and people sitting in different continents, not necessarily someone that you can run to ask a question or to get to do something. So what's the value of that, and how does that work?
Okay, so there's we call it the processing Bible. So in each country we have a processing Bible with all the rules, guidelines. If there is something country specific, then if there is error checks to be done, and the aim of and it's standardized, so you will have the same format in all countries, and it will just be country specific where there is different activities or error checks to be done. We store that on our side on the secure drive. I have a secure drive for each one of the countries with a set index. So with this, you can I is a firm believer of process, governance, and training. To me, that's very important.
I completely agree with you. I think if we look at how business was done traditionally versus how we do it today, it's very different. So we definitely aren't doing things the same way as we used to a couple of years ago. And processes kind of did not get as much attention or value in the way we used to do things. Normally a system or maybe a habit of how we used to do things used to drive that specific strategy, where we kind of started to see a trend now where businesses are moving towards that efficiency, towards rather getting systems to enhance the process that would make business sense. And I think this is a beautiful example of that. So, Tinka, again, thinking about the complexity of Ericsson in terms of business and being in 28 countries, were all of these countries running on separate payrolls, or were they on the same system?
So we had, but this was locally on each person's laptop. In Nigeria, we used the same software that we used in South Africa, and it was done in-house. In the East countries, we had tax advisors doing the payroll, and one payroll provider that I wasn't familiar with. Then in West Africa, we had one of the big 5 tax firms that was handling payroll. So I think the biggest headache at that point for me was consolidation of reports when you had to do a report for management. That took forever. So what we did when we decided to move over to PaySpace, the PaySpace team and us, we did it in a phased approach. And I think that was very beneficial. There already we learned a lot. And I think that just by going through that whole process, we picked up such a benefit of making sure that there is processes, guidelines, and making sure that we standardize. To me, standardization is also very important, because what you find is if your process is standardized and you have someone that is leaving unexpectedly, or there's some problem that you are faced, and there's a standard process, you can always refer back to the process, and you can apply it in all the different countries.
No, definitely. And that's, again, a beautiful example of how to mitigate that business risk. And I think it's where that value of that processing Bible comes in, as you wouldn't be able to create such a document if, or a manual or a Bible, if we can call it that, if there weren't any standardization of processes. That actually leads me to a question. So putting my business analyst hat on, different countries and different payrolls would probably relate, especially if there are so many role players affecting this. So the big five, one of the big five firms, people in country processing, people in West Africa, people in South Africa, we all see things differently. And if I think back to my consulting days, it was quite easy to pick up or migrating a customer, and then car allowance was spelled different. For example, we'll have the whole 2 words car allowance and then another line car ALL. And when you do reports, it essentially is the same element, but it doesn't match up. Were these also some of the examples or struggles that you experienced because of this?
So you'll find, especially in West Africa, that there's because they are French, you need to make sure that the naming convention of your component is exactly what it's prescribed. So you'll find that, but even if you look at the naming conventions between Africa and the Middle East and Europe, because we're currently implementing a new module of SAP, and you won't believe how different the naming conventions just between what Africa uses and what the European countries uses is. So yes, that in itself was a exercise. So what we also do about once a month, once every 2 months, is go through the standardized component report on cloud analytics, which we have added there. And what the aim with that is to make sure that even the spelling of the components is the same, because then if you have to do analytic reports or you have to report, it is easy, because then you have one component and you can report on that component. For example, if you look at overtime, there's so many different types of overtime in just the countries that we are dealing with. So with that, it's not always as easy. And I always get the question, why is there like 20 different lines for overtime? But it's because of the different rules. But then where it is possible to standardize, for example, country manager allowance, or another allowance would be rewards. We standardized our rewards to be, for example, star awards, president awards. So that makes a lot of your reporting easier.
Definitely. And what did this do for business efficiency in terms of consolidation? So the reporting has obviously been something that you can enhance, and ultimately consolidated reporting, identifying trends, leads to better insight to your data. Was it sort of the first time that you were able to look at your operations from a bird's eye level to see where movements are, where trends are, where can we start enhancing these processes and efficiencies?
I think to a big extent, yes. But then to me, the big benefit was the fact that it reduced a lot of time on my side, because now you can pull a report and you have the data for all the countries in the same report, where in the past it used to take me days to consolidate one report. Now I can pull a let's take a simple example. If you look at headcount, now on Cloud Analytics, I can pull one report and it will immediately give me the headcount for all the countries in the same report. And it sounds simple, but if you look at that, if you have to first look at different systems and then consolidate, it takes time.
100%. And I guess time is money at the end of the day, and you need insight to that pieces of data for strategic decisions, especially if you're going to be starting to plan in terms of global operations.
Yes, definitely.
Fantastic. So, Tinka, did Ericsson have a cloud strategy while moving across to PaySpace?
Yeah, if I think back, our biggest challenge with hosting the software in-house was the fact that we had to have a separate server because we wanted to make sure that no one gets access to the data by accident. And then your server is not, our server got outdated. That was the one challenge. And then if something happens to the server, your data is lost. We also had in Nigeria where the payroll data was stored on a person's laptop. If the laptop is stolen, that's also a big problem. So I think that was one of the reasons why we moved over to cloud. Then secondly, the fact that then you have a team can have access to the same data without sending files back and forth. Then I think cost reduction by using, and then it just made more business sense. Now, if you look at the fact that the team that is now handling the payroll for Africa is sitting in India, and we already had everything on the cloud when they started, it makes it very, very easy. Everyone to have access that physically or should have access.
Perfect. So that collaboration, at least, was one of the big enhancements.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So
Correct.
just kind of rewinding a little, some of the compliance issues that was experienced, what was the impact on the business and where are we today? Has that changed?
I think there's a more and more bigger focus on compliance and also on now with POPI Act to make sure that we are always compliant with Ericsson's rules, and even, for example, in this case, the legal requirements of the POPI Act. So it helped a lot. We've changed now at the beginning of the year to one of the big five, a new tax advisor, and there's you see when you because every few years you rotate, there's a different focus from the new tax advisor. They are much more focused on compliance, and this is a part of a payroll that I also really like. If you're compliant, if you're compliant to the rules, there's other issues that just falls away. So compliance to me is a passion.
I love that. So essentially cutting down on processing time, cutting down on worries, and that would ultimately again result in a big saving. So processes would run smoothly, data would be more accurate, and you wouldn't be spending so much time on any kind of audits. Definitely.
And the fact that there's no audit findings. I think, to me, if there's an audit finding, it means that there's a problem. So when we have our opening meetings at the beginning of the year with the auditors, the first thing I say is, if there is, if you please involve me in all your meetings. And I can say with proud that we haven't had any audit findings in the last 2 years with payroll.
Wow, that's something that So as I'm sitting here hearing that makes me really proud. So when I speak to the outsourcing team, especially, so being in sales, I very seldomly get the opportunity to see what they are busy with. And I had a couple of interesting stories with customers as well, where they actually started speaking about the value of outsourcing. And I started realizing that maybe, so account managers, the term describes it really well, but they are so much more than that. They become business advisors and essentially an extension of your business. So maybe I should rather, instead of sharing the story, ask you if that is true, because obviously I'm sitting within PaySpace, and where I'm sitting, the outsourcing team has been doing a really great job at ensuring efficiency, collaborating, going that extra mile. They aren't just processing the payroll.
If I look at the team, the PaySpace team that is working on Ericsson, I can say to you, I think many times Edmund, if he sees my name on his cell phone, I can just imagine what he thinks. But if I think of the journey that we have had with PaySpace, the collaboration, the dedication of the team, I can really say that the team, we started with something that we all wanted to grow, and we have all these countries, we have all these processes, and it all runs smoothly. If I think of where it starts each month, so we have a payroll calendar, which the team on our side will formulate with all the deadlines, which is then shared with the PaySpace team to make sure that there isn't anything on their side that we need to make sure that is also added to the calendar. And there the process starts. Then if I think the major improvements, or you can say added value items that we've put in place is, for example, the incident report. We have an incident report that is the PaySpace team formulates each month, and then also the Ericsson team, and then we have an operations meeting every month and we discuss it. I think that also adds a lot of value, because there you can see where there is simply a need for training, or where you can detect where there's a problem that will grow, and even if there's compliments. So I think with every step of our journey, we have added value. I don't think that in this whole journey, we have had one process that I can say that was a failure. I think in everything that we've done with the PaySpace team, we made sure that we analyzed it properly. We brainstormed to make sure that it is really to the benefit of both teams. So I think that in a nutshell, I think of what value this added in my team.
No, I absolutely love that, and thanks for confirming. So as I said, it really makes, I actually have goosebumps as you explained it, just because the team takes so much pride in what they do. And we obviously, this is a partnership, and we couldn't have achieved anything without each other and working together. And you've played a tremendous role in all of this. So Tinka, we are basically running out of time, and I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I still have so many questions, but maybe just as a final thought, so I've always experienced you as a driven and passionate professional. And I mean, we just shared some of these successes that we can actually measure and see. But what motivates you to do what you do?
What motivates me? The end result. I think I'm very process driven. So sometimes I think I'm very set on a goal. But to me, I set goals for myself, and I make sure that in the process that I evaluate where I am and where I want to be. And I think if at the beginning of the year, when I set my goals, I make sure that it is reachable. And then at the end of the year, that is what I wanted to accomplish. And I think with what we've done in payroll with PaySpace and Ericsson in the last 4 years, I think that we have added value. And I hope in every situation that we were in with PaySpace and everything that we've learned, that in this relationship, PaySpace also were able to add some value to new processes, or when they have to take on a new client. To me, that will mean that our relationship means something.
No, it's been very valuable, and it's, as I mentioned, it would have been possible without that collaboration, and it's something that I think adds value both ways going forward. It helps with that efficiency, and thank you so much for that. I think you are spot on with setting goals. You made me think of a quote that I kind of valued a lot in my university days, and that was, "A dream is only a dream until you breathe life into it." Now that's very inspirational, and kind of it's cloudy, but in a sense it's exactly what it is. You need to make it measurable, and you need to focus on it every single day, otherwise you won't achieve it. And this is a huge success story about how that was done.
Thank you.
So,
Definitely.
Tinka, it has been a privilege. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invite.